Did you say Ed or Doug?
No, Doug, you.
Okay.
How does it
Um,
feel being the person to start off the novel line?
well, it's in retrospect, it's pretty awesome. At the time, I have to say, I was really eager to write a novel that was set in a Celtic kind of uh, land. I love the King Arthur stories and Prince Valiant and all that
Uh-huh.
stuff. And I read the White Alexander's book. I think it's based off of a Welsh series, the Mabinogion, but he wrote the Chronicles of Prydain, which it's a young adult series, but even though I was a full adult when I read it, it was like, wow, this is amazing what fantasy could accomplish, and it made me more captivated in the into that Celtic, the British, Irish, Welsh environment. And so when the Forgotten Realms was out there, and I had reached up, I'd been pestering the TSR book department for a while, and they were decided that I could take a shot at writing a novel. And the Forgotten Realms, Ed was gracious enough to say that he had the Moonshae Islands. That was Ed's name for a group of islands off the coast of the continent. And maybe I think if I'm right about this, but Ed, correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody told me that Ed said that he was just envisioning those as kind of an Earth Sea sort of environment. There were lots of little islands. And I was like, well, what if we made them like fewer islands, but bigger islands that were more like Great Britain? And I think and I hope that Ed was amenable to that. At least that's what I heard,
Yeah.
because this is also one of the beauties of the Forgotten Realms, that I was allowed to basically map that out the in the setting that I wanted to use and start my novel in a land that was essentially inspired by Celtic Britain, and um, and it fit perfectly into the Moonshaes. It doesn't, unlike a lot of stuff, it doesn't interact a lot with the mainland of the Moonshaes because it's an island. I mean, an island nation, but um, it was so perfect that was able to fit right into the Moonshaes, and so I took off and wrote that, and I had a great time. And the book, I'm still really proud of that book. The first book was Dark Walker on Moonshae,
Hmm.
um, and it's still, as far as I know, it's still in print, which is not true of all of my, in fact, of most of my books. But um, it was, it led to a whole new career path for me, and the Forgotten Realms gets a lot of the credit for that.
And you were already an established game designer at that point when you wrote that novel, right?
Yes, I started in '82 at TSR, and I have to say, I was a fairly productive game designer. I wrote
Mhm.
a lot of modules. I did some game systems. When Star Frontiers came out, which was all like characters based on one planet, I got the chance to design the Nighthawks rules, which was the spaceship rules that took it,
Mm.
from out into outer space. And so I was really, and I loved it. I had, I went into this as a high school teacher, but that was, I was changed jobs and basically got the chance to do my hobby for a living. And I had also really always wanted to be a novelist. And I'd actually had these dreams in high school. I wrote elaborate, long, short stories in high school. And I thought, man, this is my, future. But then I went to college, and no, it's not your future. I learned, basically got a degree as a English and speech and drama teacher, which was, it was a nice job. I could have gone through my whole life teaching teaching speech and drama and directing high school plays, and that would have been a fulfilling life. But I also just, mainly because I had Heidi Gygax as a student in my class.
Really? Oh,
Yes, in
wow.
this little town in Wisconsin, Clinton, Wisconsin. And she showed me one day she had a pass to get out of class the next day because she was going to be interviewed by People magazine. And I'm like, well, what's that about? And she said, well, my dad invented this game. And which I had heard of D&D. I'd never seen a copy of it. I didn't know anything about it except some theater people I knew had said it's pretty cool. And so I told her, well, I heard that sounds really interesting. I was a gamer in terms of like Avalon Hill war games and stuff like that, Stratego and Risk, and so I did like strategy games, but I had never really even imagined the concept of a role playing game. And so after she missed the class the next day and came back, she brought me a copy of the basic set from her dad, a gift from her dad. And by that weekend, I had a campaign started. And so my life
Wow.
changed on that particular week because it became a really, really immersive hobby.
So that changed the whole path of your life, actually.
Well, it sure did. Yes.
That meeting with Heidi.
Yep. I
Wow,
never
that's
failed to thank her. I still see her at some of the Lake Geneva conventions. But yes, she was a sophomore in my speech class and a great student, by the way.
yeah. I think she lives in Hawaii right now. I'm not sure.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, I think she lives in Hawaii. Um, so one of the reasons why, besides the fact that you started the the soul sucking hobby, which pretty much takes over my life since 1978, and just morphed from Greyhawk into the Forgotten Realms. Um, you created this whole great area in the Moonshades. How did it feel? And then we're gonna kind of expand on it. How did it feel seeing that as the beginning of the latest D&D movie where they used part of the Moonshades in there? And my question, of course, is going to be, and I think I talked to you earlier about it. If, well, I didn't say this. If you don't know where it would be, where would you put that Harper stronghold in the Moonshades?
That's a really good question because the the whole Harper's concept came. I mean, it fits really perfectly in the Celtic mythos, but I I would say if I was, and I like I said in our text conversations, this is 30 plus years ago that I did this, so
Right.
I would think that the realm of Gwyneth, the one where Tristan Kendrick became the High King,
Hmm.
um, was my quintessential domain, and the one that was really inspired by Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Prydain, which was based on Wales. I mine's my Gwyneth is a little bigger than Wales, the way he portrays it in Prydain, because Wales is not that big of a place. But
Right.
um, the notion of somewhere in there would be perfect for a stronghold like the Harpers.
Okay. So because I mean the the way they portrayed it in the movie was it was this desolate northern island that was just kind of like you'd see in the North Sea, crashing with waves, ice and snow, and just horrible conditions. So I don't know if
Right.
that would that fit with Gwyneth or part of that area.
Well, in a way, it's more. If you think of it in terms of Great Britain, it's more like Scotland probably than
Right.
Wales. But Wales is also subject to some pretty intense weather from the
Right.
Irish Sea,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so I think I mean it's just not the most civilized part of the islands like
Mhm.
London and Kent and stuff like that. So I think Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, any one of them could be a legitimate setting for that kind of desolate place. If depending on how desolate, I'm trying to remember from the movie. I love that movie. They did a really good job, I
They
think.
did a good job, didn't they?
Yes. Um, that I didn't feel like it was like Greenland or anything.
No.
But yeah, so I honestly don't have a great sense of the Moonshade geography to say where I think it should be. I'm really
Uh-huh.
glad they put it there.
You,
Right. No,
you,
it was a shock to me. I didn't. Well, Eric, where would you put it in the Moonshades? Well, what would be a good location? And you can ask Ed the same thing. what would be a good location for this stronghold? It's supposed to be a secret Harper stronghold, so
Mm.
you know.
I would put it in the Corin Archipelago, hands down.
Bingo. Yes. My
And
I support.
and in fact, we did that because you asked this question last time we met,
Yeah,
and
I know.
it got me thinking. And we had a big event with the announcement of the royal wedding in our Moonshade
Right.
campaign, and so we had the rumor mill was the activity that the players had to do. And you had a certain number of rumor cards in your hand, and you had to go around and interact with everybody else and collect as many of the other rumors as you could. And rather than just having the rumors just be, this is a rumor on the card, we wrote up rumors. And one of them was, there's a Harper hold up in the Corn Archipelago. And that one, I want to tip the hat to you, Jeff, for putting that one in thought in my mind. So as far as BMGs is concerned, it's up in the Corn Archipelago because it
Okay.
fits the requirements. It's a little bit north. It's heavy winds, very small islands that are all grouped together, and it seemed to fit the bill perfectly.
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of out of the way.
And ironically, Le Guin's Earthsea is based on the Hebrides, the
Oh.
real world Hebrides. So I mean, it all fits with the Corinne and so on because it occupies the same geographical position, well, a little more to the northeast than just the north, as the Hebrides do in Scotland. And you see, all I was trying for in my original Moonchase is I wanted a huge conglomeration of tiny islands and for the same story purposes that Ursula did with Earthsea.
Yeah.
Most people don't travel off their own island. The fishermen do the most faring, but they fish in known areas where they can get fish. And only
Right.
a rare few people sail further, the trading ships that, so it's not. And therefore, it was no loss because I can do that elsewhere. The Nolancer, the Pirate Isles, or
Mhm.
the Isles in the Sea of Fallen Stars. I can do those sort of stories, so it makes room for a continent. I was against and still am real world analogs that are too close to stuff from our real world in the realms because it leads to rules lawyering and people trying to base things on history, real world history, or worse, Hollywood depictions of history.
Right.
But if you're gonna do borrowings from the real world, the Matter of Britain, the Celtic Twilight, that sort of stuff is as close as it's the stuff I love. But yeah, if I was retrofitting the Harper Stronghold, it has to be in Corinne. Yeah, because it's why haven't you tripped over all these Harpers coming and going?
Yeah.
Now the other thing you do, if you're going to put it in Gwyneth, then you have to find your deepest, darkest forest, usually where there's mountains or ridges or peaks or foothills leading up to a peak in the forest, and stick it in there. And then have the Harper sort of work their way into the forest under other pretexts. I'm a woodcutter. I'm a I'm a birder. I'm a rare a gatherer of rare mushrooms or whatever, and then go into because otherwise you had this traffic problem. But if you stick it out in Corinne on all the islands, then that problem goes away.
Yeah. That guy who gathers the mushrooms, he sounds like a really fun guy.
Aha! 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 Aha!
Oh,
Sorry. Okay, I'll show myself out.
and we got the first Wisconsin joke.
I love it. More of them, please.
Bringing things back to the real world, Ed, I gotta ask you a question about this experience from your point of view. When this very first Darkwalker on Moonshade's novel gets published, what for you was that experience like? Were you super pissed? Were you excited? Were you worried and trepidatious? Were you very, very humbled? What was it like to see your world have life breathed into it for the first time in publication in this way with the first novel?
I'm
I
really
would
curious about that too.
okay. I was frankly delighted.
Okay.
And here's why. When I saw, okay, first they sent me, in those days when you published a mass market paperback, they would send out extra covers, flat covers
Right.
to stores, and a small store would pin them up behind the cash or whatever as a sort of advertisement to get people to order. There was a huge collage of them at Baka, the science fiction bookstore in Toronto, all the time. So it was like, ooh, I like this illo. Number one. Number two, more importantly, it's like, oh, good. They're not going to put this out in Deep Six it immediately. They're spending money. There's going to be a novel line. It's going to come to life because any novel, any long fiction can show you what it feels like to live in the world, what it smells like, what it looks like, the experience of being in the setting in a way that gaming stuff in those days, because gaming stuff in those days, there's no pixels, it's all print.
Right.
So word count is king, and you never have enough of it. And if you're the crunchier you make a setting, and the more of it is given over to stats and figures and wargaming sand table stuff, and then if you say, yeah, but I want to make mine all full of fluff or the world lore, then you really run out of word count in a hurry.
Yeah.
The novels are your way to hand it to the reader to tell stories in the setting that anybody, and by the way, in those days, novels outsold games 10 to 1 because there
Right.
have always been more people alive in the United States of America who know how to read books as opposed to play complicated war games that are
Yeah.
beyond the board games that your family pulls out, beyond Parcheesi and Steeplechase and all that stuff. And the ones who can role play beyond charades and ham acting at school, which everybody gets embarrassed about when adults are involved or grandparents. It's sort of like, no. The ones who can role play is a subset even of game players. So in those days, it was like, okay, this is going to bring the realms and D&D to a much wider audience.
Yeah.
Because for one thing, I had already noticed, and because as a kid, I would be dragged around to the doctor and the dentist. My dentist happened to be my uncle, so it was not a trepidatious thing. It was old home week as he stuck his tobacco stained fingers in your mouth. There were no gloves in those, and everything. But anyway,
You have a
thing
way of
is,
coloring a picture there, Ed.
yeah, well,
That's an image.
but you see, the thing is, the waiting room was like somebody's living room, and the whole family went. Me and my two sisters and a mother, sometimes father as well. So that's a lot of people to shuttle through one giant dentist chair in another room, which means you have a lot of time to spend in the waiting room. And the waiting room was full of old books and magazines, from Reader's Digest to Time to Newsweek, and far more interesting things. And my uncle was not a sadist. He didn't do the doctor's thing of let's put all the professional magazines full of skin conditions and bone deformities and stuff out there for the patients to read and be entertained. There was actually fun stuff there. But you see, that's the same thing that once you've published paperback books, they do. They're lying there and somebody finds them, or they're in a used bookstore, or they're at the library and somebody comes across them and you gain a new fan of this stuff right away. So I was delighted that Darkwalker came out. At the same time, you see, what had happened first is one of my maps had been done up, colorized, and then folded as a free thing into an issue of Dragon. So you had to pull it out and unfold it 4 ways, and you got a little mini map of a little bit of the realms. And Darkwalker was the second thing, and the first full stand on its own thing. And then it was followed in my household by books department, Mary Kirchhoff, sending me tons and tons of printouts of the first run of novels, like The Crystal Shard and so on.
Yeah.
And then hastily saying, okay, Ed, have you read it? Yes. Can we have it back now? That's the only copy. What? as the, because I would drive 100 miles into work in Toronto and 100 miles home. So in the evening, I would deal with whatever had gone wrong in this aging farmhouse, burnt out light bulbs, whatever, for her parents. And then I would collapse exhausted onto the living room floor so they could tell me about their exciting day of knitting. And the cat would walk across all the pieces of the manuscript, all the pages were spread out on the floor, and the cat would walk on them. And I'd be reading this, and Doug's novel was far better and more polished than all these rough drafts I was seeing. So I was delighted. There you go. And no, this thing is, it felt like a real story, as in, Doug was not Clark Ashtoning Smith us. He was not sending us to the dictionary to look up 42 obscure words when you were reading.
Yeah.
And he was not Conaning us, his mighty thews bulged as the sword swung, and geysers of gore dripped down the page as another dragon bit the dust. So, in effect, the writing style could dissolve and become invisible as you just stepped into the story. Straight ahead storytelling, and I could enjoy the story. And so I was delighted because, here's the realms coming to life. Now, when you create your own world and you detail everything in it, what's the one thing your world can't do?